Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. Thank you so much for bearing with me on my hiatus and vacation there. Definitely well appreciated. I am doing the Alaya character review. I still have Halloween, Lucia, Chunok, and Agrius on my backlog here to continue doing. I just know with the current Guild War map buffs, I figure Alaya is a little more pertinent. A lot of you have already pulled for the other characters, decided whether or not you want to use them. But for now, jumping into things, the presentation today, it's going to be the standard character overview, the base stat, total stat analysis, some crit hit and crit avoid metrics, accuracy, evasion, the report card being the big thing I want to focus on, and then my general thoughts here in the second section as well. I will go through the class and job overview and the abilities, what I think you should have on and off, and then finally I'm going to wrap things up with the Esper synergies and weapon optimization. I am scrapping the vision card analysis and the trust stones here. Unfortunately, at this point in the game, I feel like these two things aren't necessarily specific to the character. They're more fundamental to how you build a comp in general. Are there some vision cards that are really good on Alaya? Yes, there's lots of them though. It's really more dependent upon what you want to run for your team. And trust stones are a little more of a science at this point that aren't unique to characters. It's really more just a way of thinking. And I've created 2 videos to kind of teach you how to think about trust stones. That at this point, when I do these reviews, it gets rather repetitive just saying the same thing every time because it's really just theory. It's not necessarily always character specific. But moving along here, brand new ice unit. They gave her the Dragon Princess unique main job as well as the Ranger and Paladin sub jobs. She equips guns, hat cloth, and accessories. Move of 3, jump of 1 as a brand new 100 cost unit. Now in terms of resistances, starts off half decent here on the 15% pierce and missile. Not 2 combinations that you quite often see as the highest on a character, but 5% to slash, minus 10% to strike, and minus 5% to magic. In my opinion, magic's really the only one you have to look out for, but even then, as we're going to see throughout the presentation, she really is more of a glass cannon, so I wouldn't worry too much about resistances and bulking her up. You're really not going to get a ton of value that way. But from a status element perspective, she is a character that you're not going to want at 50 faith. Now, whether you want her at 97, even 80 faith is a half decent spot. You'll trade off some percentage points on likelihood of proccing status effects. She does have a couple that you absolutely want to be able to implement into the battle, so you should be wary about what she can also be hit by. Blind, 50% resistance is a good one considering a big uptick in that status element recently. 50% to confusion has its time and place. The 10% to stun is certainly nice as well. Overall, rather well-rounded from a status element perspective. Now we look at the base stats for all of the different attributes here. HP-wise, she is kind of right in the middle. A little surprising for a missile unit. I would have expected a little bit lower. Her HP value in the end of things doesn't get terribly high, but it is nice that she kind of starts off at least average to start. From an attack perspective, definitely skews on the lower side of things for DPS units or offensive physical units more specifically, and that's not terribly surprising. Most missile units skew on the lower side of their base attack stat. From an agility perspective, right there in the middle, neither good nor bad. Dexterity though, she is the new leader in the global unit. She is the #1 highest base dexterity overall, which does excellent things for her crit rate as well as her potential accuracy, which she needs a little bit of help with, we'll see soon, but not a terrible weakness overall. And then luck, she is relatively average, does skew a little bit on the higher side of things, nothing too spectacular though. And we reconcile the base stats here to the total stats once we incorporate the board nodes, things of that nature. From a base stat perspective, and this 4th bar is 100% because she's the #1 dexterity leader. Overall, she does start off relatively average across a lot of these metrics, and when you incorporate the board stats and everything else, I wouldn't say there's a bunch of significant changes. They don't give her as much dexterity in the board as we'll see in a second, but they do give her some extra agility points to kind of make up for that average agility. And if we're looking at the sources of this, they do give her 10 agility here on the board stats. Most characters get about 6 to 8, so those extra 2 to 3 certainly help. They definitely gypped her on the dexterity stat here, only giving her 38. Totally fine though. I don't think it necessarily changes a whole bunch. And luck stat at 72, really kind of competitive with a lot of things here. Overall, starts off with a half decent spot for stats. No glaring weaknesses, if you will. Now the crit hit and crit avoid, despite the immensely high base dexterity, as we saw, they did kind of jip her on the board. So she does kind of fall back to earth here on the innate critical hit rate, but you can certainly get that back up with dexterity boosting things. The critical avoidance rate, which scales purely off of luck, as we saw, she's kind of in the average range there. Nothing too crazy here either. So nothing terribly notable other than you certainly can boost the crit hit rate higher due to the base dexterity stat. Now, for accuracy perspective, she does skew on the higher side of things overall here, and the blue line is the total innate accuracy. The green is if you start equipping passives, which certainly are easy ways to gain 25 accuracy on a lot of characters here. She does stay competitive, I'd say, at the top 10% of characters here, overall in a really good starting spot. Now we look at the evasion, not an evade character at all, definitely more toward the lower end here. You shouldn't expect her to dodge anything. But we get to the DPS report card now, kind of reconciling what we've seen for the base and the total stats. kind of incorporating a little bit more about what her kit has to offer potentially. When we looked at effective HP here, I'm going for a C-. She's definitely on the squishier side of things, although her resists aren't the worst in the world. Overall, HP does skew on the lower side of things, but not surprising, a lot of missile units do. She definitely is stronger from a physical HP perspective, just given the resists as we saw, but also she has an innate 4 defense, and she does have the potential for a physical barrier as well, so a little higher there. The magic stat really going for a D. No spirit, the minus 5%. Totally fine, though. Not every magic user can even get in range to hit her, as we're going to see here. And just recapping some of this, relatively strong resist, the 4 defense. You will typically build for offense, not for bulk, so you don't really have to worry about this lower grade, and definitely more physically sturdy than magically sturdy. Now, primary stat, I'm going a D. Definitely skews lower on the overall attack stat, but she is relatively in line with other missile units, and her overall damage output does not suffer despite the overall lower starting attack. She has some fantastic imperils and penetrations, which we'll see on the next slide when it kind of highlights some of the summary here. Now, agility, definitely a C, straight average agility, nothing to boost it overall, that's totally okay. Accuracy, I am going A- here. She's got a decent enough amount of innate accuracy, a passive that can give her an extra 25. Now, I don't think that's an ideal passive to be equipping. I think there are 2 other much better ones, but she also does have sharpshoot in the sub job, so overall, really not a bad spot. I'm going with the A- there. Evasion, going for a C-, don't expect it whatsoever. And movement, I'm actually going with an A, and there's an asterisk here because she's got incredible movement potential, or lack thereof. And this is kind of different from other characters where I grade their movement based upon their jump or move potential, and she actually goes the opposite and has a move decreasing passive, which is superb. Really fits in well to what she wants to do as a ranged character. So overall, movement is an A. It's honestly one of the strongest things about her. Now, passives, also an A-, 2 exceptionally good passives, and honestly, the rest of them, they're not bad passives. They're just not ideal, but they do fit into a variety of metas and potential builds, as we'll see. Counter kit, I'm going with an A+ here. She's got 2 of the best counter abilities in the game, as we'll see, both for their own unique situations. Overall kit, I'm going with an A as well, absolutely stacked with utility top to bottom for a final grade of an A. She is an exceptionally good character. When you do see the ice meta continue to evolve, she will be a big part of why. Now, obviously, Snow and Velos are 2 of the larger contributors to that. Eliza in her own way as well. Gilgamesh still for the Time Age shenanigans. And obviously, Ice does have a stronger set of vision cards than many other elements do. But overall, she is a character that takes advantage of all of this and more, and is a critical piece, not only for PvP content, but for PvE content. She does a lot of really great things as well. Now, we look at the damage potential here, just because I want to kind of, again, bring some attention to that D grade on the overall attack stat, which isn't a big concern. When we look at the defense penetration that she has, she gets 40 from a passive, 30 from one of her offensive abilities after she uses it, 20 from the Snow Vision card, and 10 potentially from a Trust Stone passive, or even 20 from a weapon. So either way, you can get easily anywhere from 80 to 100 defense penetration, which is, quite frankly, pretty nuts for a missile unit. There's really not many of them that get to that high of a defense penetration level. When we look at missile resistance penetration here, she gets 40 after using one of her offensive abilities here. She gets 18% penetration from the new vision card that drops this week, up to 15 from the diamond coat, or just a 10 from a Trust Stone passive. Again, a lot of different ways for her to penetrate enemy missile resistance if that's what they're gearing for. And when we look at other damage increasing abilities, she can dispel, protect, she has a physical barrier break, she's got a 38% missile resistance in peril, and her limit break is a 38% ice in peril as well. So when you talk about how do you defend against her as a character, now obviously you're not going to use all of these things at once, but the beauty of a character like this, and Lightning, the character from 13, is actually very similar in this regard, is that there's really not many ways that you can defend against this. If you stack all on defense, that's fine, she can imperil you in other ways. If you stack all on missile resistance, okay, that's fine, she can penetrate that or imperil that as well. If you want to go protect, she can dispel it. Barrier, she can break it. Like, there's really not many ways that you can mitigate her potential damage, which keeps for some good consistency as a damage dealer overall. Now we look at the passive abilities here. Dragon Stag Sharpshooting is one of my favorites here. Increased range of 2. The defense penetration of 40 is also vitally important. My second favorite here is the Heavy Ordnance techniques, where you get that missile attack of 12, acquired AP of 40%, very important for her damage uptime, but more than anything, the decreased move of 1 for self is so crucially important as a sniper and as a glass cannon that you want to keep her as far away as you can from the fray as possible. And she actually has an ability that will make her stronger so long as you're not getting hit. We'll see that in a couple slides here on the buffs. But for those of you that are already thinking outside the box, you can also equip the bow tie accessory here and further decrease the move as well to make her the first character ever to get a move of 1, which actually is a very suggested build in many instances. You'd be surprised. But I do like a handful of these other ones here. Ranger Lore obviously neuters a little bit of her range just by 1 square, but it does increase the accuracy 25. Holy Knight's Protection, don't sleep on here either. I don't think it's ideal, but when you get to some of those smaller maps where maybe she gets caught in some of the extra damage, 12 defense, 12% HP certainly does help. And focus, although you're probably not going to use, if you are at some point trying to just stack missile attack up and really do a one-shot kill, that's definitely a good option as well. So nice variety of passive abilities to potentially choose from. Now we look at the counter abilities. 2 different kinds of reflex here. Dragon Dodge is a physical-oriented reflex, but when you do, you also get 30% attack for 3 turns, which excellent, excellent. And the general reflex is both physical and magical. So to me, it's really just your choice on whether or not you're going against a team that's heavy magic or a team that's heavy physical. Obviously, if you're going against a team that's heavy physical, you're going to want the Dragon Dodge. If you're worried about magic abilities, go for the reflex instead. In theory, I like Paladin's Guard just for the physical damage reduction, but she's squishy enough that it's probably not going to make that big of a difference. I'd rather have the option to outright dodge an ability. Now we get into the mage up here, the buffs in particular. So these 2 buffs. Quick Fire Stance is the first one here, restores 300 CT after use, and also increases missile attack by 25 for 3 turns. Overall, really good buff here. March of the Dragon Stag Princess is the best buff here, though. This is a fantastic buff. It's a pretty giant AoE that she can move to teammates to also buff them as well, which gives them ice attack of 30 for 3 turns, gives her that missile resistance penetration of 40 as we talked about earlier, also decreases AP consumption by 33%, but it also increases her range plus 1. And the big stipulation on this is that it removes this effect after being hit twice. So to be able to stay as far away as you can from the battle to avoid being hit and dispelling these extra buffs, really important. So this is a absolutely stellar buff that will obviously not only help her, but someone like Alaya as well. But theoretically, any ice damage dealer is going to significantly benefit from the 30 ice attack as well. Now we look at the offensive abilities here. Eraser is the base ability. All of these do require line of sight. She's not a trajectory type hero on the main job here, but Eraser is a dispel re-raise, very, very useful. The Rending Tri-Shot is the barrier break. It's also a triple hit shot, which pairs exceptionally well with Alaya. Hail of Bullets is the one that we talked about that gives you the defense penetration of 30% here. This is also very important for the chance to inflict Frostbite as well, and she does, as her mastery ability, we'll see in a couple slides, have an increased chance to inflict Frostbite. This is a really, really good way to potentially just drain the enemies of their AP. There's not a lot of Frostbite protection out there currently, so definitely something to lean into. And then Armor Border is the Dispel Protect. It's just incredibly powerful to be able to negate that damage mitigation, but it's also a piercing type ability, so it can go through 2 enemies, and also is a missile imperil of 38%. And we're looking at the range and heights here. They do all have decent range of these 5 squares, upwards of 7 with the passive, and then 8 with her buff. It's also got range height of 2, so there is some upward and downward potential there. Overall, really, really strong main job. When we look at the sub jobs here, the Slug Shot, not my favorite. It's a decreased attack and agility here. This is definitely more for PvE, in my opinion, if you're trying to decrease an enemy's agility, but not the worst ability in the world. I just think it's comparatively weaker than what you get on the main job. And Heart Taker I actually do like here. This is one that has a chance to inflict charm on an enemy, a little lower on the range side of things, but overall, I think this is a very interesting one to potentially play with as well, depending upon how you want to build her offensive kit. I do see this more for manual content, though, where just looking at the damage modifiers and what the other abilities have to offer, I don't think Heart Taker is going to be used all that frequently unless you turn a bunch of stuff off. Now look at the sub jobs here. Ranger, excellent sub job, if only for the sharpshoot here. Same thing can be said for Barrage, both of these being the trajectory style attacks. Barrage is really map dependent whether or not you actually get some value out of it. I do think her main job abilities are better, but still time and place. It's really the sharpshoot access for that 100% hit chance that makes her really strong on the Ranger sub-job. And then finally, the Paladin sub-job here. To me, the only good thing about this is the Saintly Wall. A little harder to work this into your rotation, but if you are going for a character that has only 1 move, and she gets 2 to 3 turns of buffs because she's not, in range of attacking enemies all that quickly, you can definitely get Saintly Wall off here in some of that AI prioritization. Now, for the Limit Break, this is a very, very, very good Limit Break. It's a double hit. It has a 67% chance to inflict Immobilize, and when you do, it is also a 38% Ice Imperil. So I'm a big fan of these limit breaks here that have the Immobilize on them. I know Summer Lilith is actually another one, and I love the concept that if you're far enough away from the enemy, obviously you just find a way to immobilize them in place, and that way you can just outrange them and kill them before they ever get close to you. So really, really punishing limit break when it is able to proc that status effect. And the mastery ability, as I kind of talked about earlier, this really only two things to look at here. The 15% chance extra to apply the frostbite status effect, and the 30% reduced enemy reaction block rate. So both good things there overall. Now, from the AI and auto prioritization, didn't go super deep into this, but basically, March of the Dragoon Stag Princess, that's the big AoE with the ice attack up. That's her main buff that she'll always use first, and she will go in circles to apply it to everybody, so make sure you tune your AI properly. The TMR is usually the second one, and third, Quick Fire Stance, which is the CT up, as well as the missile attack up. Saintly Wall, if I had to guess, I think is between 2 and 3, but I do need to test that a little bit further. Now, for the TMR review, I actually like this TMR a lot, mostly from the statistics perspective, though, of it. That as an accessory, that extra 42 attack, 6 agility, 13 accuracy, you can play with this a handful of ways to bump that agility up, that accuracy up, or for PvE content, that 42 attack certainly is nice as well. We use a lot of those TMRs when you're trying to get those high scores. For the skill itself, though, not the worst one. It is a double cast ability. Do like that it has some nullification of status effects. It's really the attack of 40%, though, that when you consider the buff rotation, one is ice attack up. If you can get a missile attack up somehow, and then you get an attack buff up as well, here, that's where you start to really ramp up her damage overall. So this is a very good accessory. Again, if only for the statistics perspective, that it lends itself to a variety of different builds when you want to use it. Now, my general thoughts on the character. Exceptional utility for a missile character. In addition to damage, you usually don't get both. It's usually one or the other. But she really does have both. You get the re-raise remove, missile imperil, status effects, the ice attack for teammates. She does have some stellar move potential for 2 move or 1 move, depending upon the range of the map, where you can obviously get her that extra buffer nod or keep her out of range of enemy damage. Really unique passive for her that really does elevate her to a level that most missile units can't achieve. She's a true glass cannon, as we keep talking about here, and a little map dependent like other missile units, but that being said, you can still tailor her movements so that she doesn't get too close too quickly. She does have a passive that has that defense and HP if you do want to attempt to lean into the bulkier builds, which it's not impossible. It's just you really want to try to lean into the offensive build and kill things before they kill you. As I gave her with the A grade, exceptionally good unit. Now, the Esper synergies, talking really high level about these, because again, a lot of this is very matchup specific. The all-around best still are Odin and Chaos Odin. There's a lot to do there from a Man-Eater modifier that's applicable on all your characters, so you don't have to reset the Esper nodes all the time, but just having the flexibility of the missile resistance, the magic resistance, the slash resistance, the accuracy, like there's just so many good nodes between these two Espers, as well as the agility values, that these are two of the de facto best for DPS. Great missile options, in my opinion, are Chocobo and Brachiosaur. They both offer two different things there from an agility perspective, but definitely lean heavier into the missile modifiers. And then finally, for ice attack, I do like these three of Phresis, Glacial, as well as MAX, all for different reasons. Phresis is definitely more for the spirit stat if you really are trying to bulk a little bit for some of that magic weakness. I do like Glacial as an alternative build for some extra accuracy with the luck percentage nodes there, where that extra luck will give her more accuracy. And then MAX is more for the slash resistance, where we saw only 5%, so you are at least able to get the ice attack as well as some of the slash resistance. So overall, like these Espers generally for what you want to equip her for. And finally, the weapon optimization. The Peacemaker was the brand new gun brought out this week. This is an exceptionally good gun here. Me personally, I do have two builds, one of the Assault and one of the Aim. I do think there's a time and place for both of these, but it's the defense and spirit penetration of 20, a further counter reduction chance of 30 that does stack with their mastery ability for 60% reduced counter chance, also giving missile attack of 15. So this is a really great gun that you don't have to rely on your trust stones as much for some of these passives, where a lot of times you have missile attack and or defense penetration. You can just ignore those on the trust stone passives. Definitely worth having multiple copies of this gun, particularly because there is no penalty for the agility value. Some guns like the Ras Al Gethi do punish you on the agility stat. This is one that does not. Now, the other gun that I do really like as well is Lara's dual pistols. This one's for a different build that's leaning more into the critical rate, where you get the crit rate of 15, the crit damage of 20. Skews a little bit higher here on some of the attack values depending on your build. I am a big fan of the Assault build for the Lara's dual pistols, but I think both these weapons are best in slot that you can get for her. And that's the Alaya character review in a nutshell. Really interesting character here as we see Ice kind of get a new identity between her and Snow and Velis and Eliza and Gilgamesh. Heck, I've even some builds here now where we've seen Barret come to fruition, that after, 8 months of not seeing any use, he can finally join an Ice missile meta and get some use. So a lot of really creative ways that she can help her team and amplify the damage of the Ice missile meta that we're kind of coming into at the moment. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll talk to y'all soon.